Hi, this week I thought I would go over something a little bit different from my usual stuff. I'm going to talk about the way that I organize scenes in Unity. So I might get a little more into the technical side of working in Unity and show you what I've been up to on that front. So when you're designing games and developing games, part of the process, at least for me, is repeatedly creating a big mess and then cleaning it up. And you sort of, as you hone in on whatever your target is, your level of organization gradually increases. But there's still this cycle of like you're working, you create a mess, and then you have to pick up that mess and keep things tidy over and over again. And that applies to code as well as doing stuff in the editor here, building levels. But I thought that this was a little more interesting to show visually for a video, so I will not be focusing on code. In code, you'd call that, I guess you'd prototype and then you'd refactor your code until it ran better once you knew what you wanted from the prototypes. But the same applies to the Unity editor. So I looked into some techniques. When I started realizing that was going to be the cycle in Unity, I started looking into some techniques for organizing my scene, and really it's kind of on the user. It depends on the specifics of your game. But I found a pretty good talk done by the people that made Inside Play Dead Games. They had a GDC talk, which I'll link to in the description, talking about dividing their environment up. So I'm sort of using some ideas from that, and then my own stuff on top of that. But basically, if you've never worked in Unity before, you create you go to create empty, and that you create these empty game objects, and they have a position in the game level and everything like that, like any other game object, but they're empty and you just use them as a folder to put content into. So your whole scene is organized with these empty game objects. In the case of this game, I've grouped things sort of logically. Like I have a single empty object that contains all of the cameras and menus and things like that. I have that disabled right now so it doesn't interfere with me clicking on things. And then, object with lighting information inside of it, sort of a utilities thing that has various, let's see, like object pooler and just a one game object that has these manager scripts attached to it that I wrote. But more interesting for this video, in the level folder here, I've got a few different things. This is turned off, the ectoplasm, because that's another object which will interfere with me if I have it on. So I usually turn these off to edit. But so for instance, I have everything that's in the play stage in this subscenes object, and then behind that in the background is the background object. So we can turn off the background. Makes it a lot clearer what you're looking at. And then within both the background and the subscenes folder, I have these different groupings of objects. So for this game, I just grouped things into rocks, infrastructure, and alien content. So in the background, it's mostly rocks. If I select rocks, you can see it's everything there. Turn off rocks, and then we have remaining infrastructure and alien content. So infrastructure in this case is just these two pipes, and then the alien content is this cluster of slime and fungus. So it's kind of like layers in Photoshop or something like that, although it's a little more complicated at times because you can have nested layers, and it takes a little while to get used to working this way. And honestly, like I said, when you're in the middle of something, sometimes you just want to work freely. You don't want to like think too much about organization or be too finicky while you're working, because you wouldn't get anything done in that case. But it does become important to come back and sort of put all of your work into these structures, organizational structures, once you've gotten something done, just so that you can make sense of your scene later. Um, so I have things divided into subscenes. Um, so in this particular level, there's an entrance subscene, a broken pipes subscene, web cave, oasis, barnacle tract, sludge pit, and exit. And the like what I've broken things into is kind of just based on the region and the gameplay. I don't have any like rigid requirements as far as the size or the number of objects in a given subscene or anything like that. Um, but this is working for now, and I think the benefit of this is that I can export these subscenes, and then we can tackle them one by one in Blender or something, as far as adding more visual fidelity to these areas and improving them. It'll be a little more coherent to work on things that way. Um, Also, I have within each subscene, they're divided into interactive and decorative content. So in this case, let's see, I'm going to disable everything except for the entrance subscene. So we're just looking at the entrance for the game level, and then within that, you can select all the decorative content. So I just disabled the decorative content. This is the interactive content. So anything the player can interact with is in this layer. And for my purposes, I made that anything that has collision that you can physically bump up against, and then also anything that reacts to your presence, like this tutorial Karen object. You can't you can't actually bump into that. It's not only does it not have a physical collider, it's got a trigger on it, but it's also offset from the main path. So you can't physically like come up against it, but it does prompt you with something when you move into the space. So it is interactive. And then within the these different categories, like within the interactive category, I have those same three subcategories: rocks, alien, and infrastructure. Infrastructure is anything technological, rocks, obvious, and alien, all the life overlaid on top of that. So the idea here is that because I have an interactive category and a decorative category, it'll make it really easy to, after the fact, we know we can go in and take all of the rocks that are in this one scene and probably stitch those together into a single model in Blender, and then re-import that into this, and it should be computationally advantageous because there's only going to be one draw call to render all of that instead of however many rocks those are. And it'll just be useful to know that I can go through and I can make sure that none of this content has lingering scripts that are about player interaction or anything like that, and just kind of reduce all of the unnecessary complexity in the game and focus on the areas that you're actually interacting with. So I think this is going to be a pretty solid system going forward. I've gotten most of the levels sort of adapted to this, but it's been iterative. Like I said, as you approach release, you kind of hone in on your final organized state. And I had a script that was at least grouping things by tag at first, and I would keep things basically organized with that, but that got a little cumbersome when you're looking at like the entire level all at once, and all like there's just one long list that has this rock in it and this rock over here as well. I feel like that's a little counterintuitive, and I'd rather be looking at things on the subscene level. Another advantage of these subscenes is that eventually I could take advantage of a tool like maybe Sector on the Unity Asset Store and divide the level up into these regions, which I can then toggle on and off as you move through the space. So like if you were in this space over here, all of the content in the Oasis region on the far side of the map would be disabled entirely. You might just activate, like if I were in the exit region, the Sledge Pit region would probably also be active because the player in this region could see content in this region. So you can set up sort of a a network of different regions and what their adjacent regions are, and only have an active region and its adjacent regions activated at a given time. So there's a lot to think about, but I think I'm starting to wrap my head around it better, and I look forward to continuing to improve the system as I find problems with it. If any of you are Unity devs, I would appreciate any comments or messages related to your own organizational techniques. This is just the best system that I've arrived at. I'm sure there are others, but yeah. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll send you another update next week.